and Lords podcast.
Welcome to the Lord's Minute, our quick hit video series where we talk about all the biggest happenings in gaming and beyond. I'm Ty Swinson, writer for Lords of Gaming, and with me today is Lord King. We are here to talk about Thor Love and Thunder. It is time, everyone. So it will be our spoiler cast on everything with Jane Foster, Gore the God Butcher, and Thor Odinson. So if you have not seen the movie yet, this is your warning now. Go watch it, come back, see our thoughts in this minute, but do not get spoiled. And that's all you get. So I'm going to kick things off to Lord King. You've been very excited about this movie on the timeline, praising it to high heaven. So how are you feeling?
Well, okay, so I've seen it 3 times already, right? And I went back and I read the books. I read Gore the God Butcher,
Hmm.
and reading the books, and I see exactly why Taika did what he did, and why Kevin Feige and the team decided to go in this direction with the storyline, because this story is an amalgamation of a ton of different books from Thor. If anybody knows Thunderstrike, Eric Masterson, um, you saw glimpses of that suit there. Uh, and then you saw the Jane Foster Mighty Thor run there. You saw Gore the God Butcher storyline there. And you also even got the Broken Thor storyline there. And another storyline with the attack on the gods, where where he gets the chance to go to Olympus, and he's really a huge fan of Zeus, and he finds out that, being a huge fan of his idol, you just never want to meet him. And this story starts off with Gore and his daughter in the desert, and I like how they started off there. It differs from the book, in this respects, that he gets the chance to watch his daughter die in
Hmm.
his hands, and he gets a chance to he survives a little bit, and the Necrosword calls out to him after its champion has fell at the hands of the god that he was serving. And it has a lot of religious connotations in the beginning of it, because he actually gets a chance to meet his god, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're here, thank you." He was eating his fruit, and his god was in paradise. And it's a stark contrast to where he left a barren desert where there
Hmm.
was no water, and he probably thought he was hallucinating up until that point. And he challenged his guard because he was upset. He was rageful, of course, because his people lost everything, and his god mocked him. And the Necrosoa was talking to him in his deepest moments of despair. It was like, "Take revenge. Here's revenge." And it just slid up into his hand, and he killed the god. And it was a good call to gods of Egypt, where the gods spill golden blood, right? And it's a whole big thing in Egyptian mythology about the golden blood, and they
Hmm.
use that here. So when he killed his god, the blood was spilled, and uh, he needed blood in order for him to actually be indoctrinated into the sword. He had to kill a god, and he killed the god. And they didn't go on to how many gods this guy has killed. He kills tons of gods, but it
Hmm.
automatically shifts to Thor, and he's growing weary from hanging out with Guardians of the Galaxy because he doesn't find his direction, and he's looking for his direction at this period of time, because he gave up his mantle of leadership, basically to Valkyrie, to be honest with you, to go find
Hmm.
himself, to go become the king that his father wanted him to be. He saw everybody in his family die, and he had this moment of reflection while he's sitting there, and that's where he's in the Thunderstrike outfit when they call him to arms. And in good Taika humor, it's hilarious.
Hmm.
Even when Gore kills the god, it's hilarious. But it's serious. It's serious tones there, and he deals with his seriousness with humor. And this is what I like from it, because it's not heavy handed like Thor. dark world.
Right.
It has seriousness, but in a way that you can deal with it with a smile. So Thor is going through all this moment of reflection and trying to find himself and trying to be this guy, and he noticed that he has to leave the Guardians of the Galaxy. So he gets his body back into shape, and at that time, his narrator is I forgot the rock guy's name because I'm always calling him Robin Williams in my head. Um,
Hmm.
so I totally forget his name, but it's so many different trails that leads to this part, and he starts talking about his lost love, Jane Foster, and this is right before he gets back to Earth, and he's telling the story, and then he comes back down to Earth because he wants to be around his people. He wants to be amongst his people because he's trying to find himself. He's trying to ground himself. Also, he hasn't has closure from
Hmm.
Jane at
Right.
all.
Right.
So he that's in the back of his head, and he actually gets there, and it's a whole big scrum going on. And as he's fighting, Valkyrie is fighting there too. And it's Gore that's actually doing the fighting because the Guardians realize that Gore is going to Earth. To be honest with you, to kill the Asgardians, and he has to go there and he has to fight for his people. And he's doing this, and then Jane comes down. When Jane comes down, he's like, "What?" Like it's blowing his mind. Like, first, how the hell do you have my hammer? Because he's hearing Milner
Hmm.
swinging around. And he's like, "Oh my god!" And he's calling Milner like it's a dog. And a lot of people don't understand the reason why he's talking to the hammer. And they're trying to give you the overarching thought that these hammers are sentient.
Right.
They they understand, they know they're bonded to the people that they're with. They have thoughts and feelings, basically, and this is what they're trying to get across. And they did get that across in the Mighty Thor book with Jane Foster, because
Hmm.
we found out that Mjolnir were sentient, and the way that she used them with a finesse touch. And I like how they used it, the hammer breaking apart and coming back together, how she was able to uh heal a broken hammer because she was broken herself and she thought the hammer was healing her, which it absolutely wasn't. But at this point, I'm gonna let you give interject while we get a little bit further along. So, what was your point up to this part?
So, okay, up to this part, I was liking the opening, classic Taika fashion and how he's been handling Thor.
Right.
I liked the fight sequence. The soundtrack was amazing. Um, and it was a lot of character. And I like Korg's narration. His new best pal in these tough times, made of rocks, narrating Thor's journey up until now. Um, and his goodbye from the Guardians. I enjoyed that the Guardians weren't in here too much. They were in here the right amount of time that they needed to be,
Yeah.
to make way for the main storyline. And um, and it's really Taika started showing the romance slash rom-com aspect that's being interwoven in these serious topics with Thor, and that Thor is a man out of love. He has been pining over the loss of love of his family, the loss of love of his home, and the loss of love with Jane that he hasn't gotten over yet.
Yeah.
And for him to go back to New Asgard, that's being run by King Valkyrie. There's a community that's been built up now. It's commercialized. It's like Disneyland for New Asgard, and they got like the Infinity Cones. You can get a ride on the long ship and everything. Um, and when Gore showed up to town, which shout out to Christian Bale, like
Yeah.
first quarter of the movie, I was just immediately impressed with his the way he carried himself and the character and the menacing aspect without needing to do too much. He just brought a presence when he was on screen every single time. And fighting off the Necrosword's minions in New Asgard and Jane making her first appearance, um it was it was definitely a statement, and like you said, of how she's using Mjolnir differently, and that it's breaking apart and coming together. And even leading up to that part, with how I was curious of how they were going to translate from the Mighty Thor comics of Jane battling with cancer to the big screen, how much they were going to
Right.
show. So they didn't full on show the repercussions of stage 4 cancer in the movie, because in the comics, Jane has completely lost all of her hair.
Yeah.
She's a lot more gaunt and decrepit. Um, but the spirit that she shared is pretty much the same. She's a fighter through and through. Natalie Portman showed that aspect of how she's still wanting to do more. She's still wanting to improve society, further her own theories, and help out where she can. And her being paired with Mjolnir made a lot of sense of why she was worthy. Um, and we find a little bit later of possibly why that comes about. But for when they first reunite together, Thor is tripping over his feet essentially, because at first he's trying to pull on this bravado air like,
Yeah.
is this person trying to steal my shtick? Like, that's my look, that's my hammer. And then uh helmet comes off as Jane. Literally, house falls down in the background. As his world is rocked once again, and that the woman that he's in love with was in this intimate relationship is basically now almost a mirror image of him.
Yeah.
And he's seeing her in a new light. And going forward, they start rekindling some old flames and figuring out how to work together as a team to stop this new threat.
Well, at that point, see, in the comic books, when Thor has that armor that he put on,
Hmm.
and some people thought it was like grandstanding, and it was like, I gotta show you I have a better armor than you. This is my style that you're trying to use here. And they definitely went through a whole bunch of different costumes that
Hmm.
showed period times in Thor's history. But this armor is very specifically, it was used in the books for when Thor had um his strength was taken away from him, because there was a spell put on him by Loki, and he had
Hmm.
brittle bones, so he had to get this Asgardian armor to put on his body because he couldn't withstand the hits when he was fighting, because bones would break.
Mm.
And I took this as Taika showing that uh, Thor was fragile right now. So the moment he saw her, he automatically put on this body armor uh, in order to shield himself from the blows that he couldn't defend himself with.
Hmm.
And he used his armor throughout the entirety of the film, um, until he felt a little bit safer. Then he saw his arms being shown later on in the film. But I thought it was a good metaphor at that point in time to show how fragile he was
Hmm.
and what he needed to shield himself from the outside world, so from things that he couldn't control at that moment. So he meets her, and the house falls down in the background, and at the same time they're still trying to fight this big bad, because there's a huge fight going on, and
Hmm.
he knows of Gore, and he knows the atrocity that Gore has committed against a ton of gods. Now, if you looked at the board when he was going to New Asgard, coming back home to Earth to Midgard, it was tons of gods that he had killed,
Hmm.
and he was just like in awe of what is going on and what is transpiring. He got a chance to see one of his dearest friends dead, and that's a direct scene from out of the books.
Yep.
So he has purpose, and he meets Gore head on, and they're fighting in the city, and he realizes, Gore can actually really kill him. He realizes in the midst of that battle, when Gore puts that blade to his neck, like, this is serious right here. And
Hmm.
Gore realizes that this is not going to be an easy fight, so I must strategize. But he also knew the moment that he picked up the necro sword told him to find infinity,
Hmm.
find infinity, find infinity. So he put it together throughout the thoughts and the symbiotic nature of the necro sword, explaining to him what he needed, and he actually saw it inside the hammer of what's I keep thinking of Thunderstrike in my head, and,
Mhm.
and of Thor's new hammer
Oh,
and
Stormbreaker.
Stormbreaker, and Stormbreaker actually is a conduit to the Bifrost, right? The way that they're using it, and they had to use it in that manner because the fact that Idris Elba's character had passed.
Mhm.
So they no longer had access to the Bifrost in that manner, and Stormbreaker is actually the conduit in doing so. So Heimdall is dead, and they don't have access to it, but they have access to it now. So Thor had to be able to speed across the galaxy using Stormbreaker. All right, so that is the big MacGuffin in the film that we actually are finding out now, because they try to figure out where the hell did Gore go, because he snatches the children
Mhm.
right before he leaves. But Hamdel's son is using his same powers of his father. He passed that on to him through his genes, so he's actually able to spirit project himself into Thor's space. He's doing it through his consciousness, and he's actually able to bring Thor to where he is, but it's really through excuse me a spirit
Mhm.
type of thing, because he's not there physically.
Yeah.
So he tries to give the kids some type of encouragement. I love this aspect of it, because Disney used the children to show you have strength, be calm in this menacing, scary situation. And Gore is actually trolling the children.
Mhm.
So this is the presence of Christian Bale. He pops up right there, and he makes a little comedy thing with one of his minions, and he pops the head off, horrifies the children, throws it
Mhm.
at him. I found it absolutely hilarious, but it's a serious moment. But you found comedy in this serious moment, and this is the genius of Taika. I
Mhm.
swear, every moment that is supposed to be a serious, thought out moment is comedy. So these guys are trying to figure out where the kids are, but we have to go get an army, and they shoot out to go to Olympus. Now, Marvel don't own the rights to use the name Olympus, so they used, what was it called? God, something like God's Palace or something like that. And this was supposed to be made from the older gods. This is not supposed to be made from Zeus, because you got a chance to see the Celestials that were
Mhm.
there.
Yep.
So the Celestials and older gods made this safe haven, if you will, for the gods. So they get there, and we do find out that Jane Foster is battling this cancer, and it's at stage 4, and she's still holding up this strong face in front of Thor. She's still holding up this hey man, the hammer chose me, and and I've been doing my thing ever since, type of thing. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's still oblivious to the true plight that's going on with
Mhm.
Jane at this moment. And they get there, and Valkyrie is hell bent on, yo, let's just go in there. Let's just tell Zeus what it is.
Mhm.
Let's just, recruit him. Let's just, like throw the gauntlet down, because she's always ready to fight. She's always ready for war. And you got to see, you see all the pantheons of gods there. You see Abbas there, and she is the panther god where Black Panther actually gets his powers from, and she communes with him. She was there sitting front center with them. Then you saw the magic gods that were there. Some thought that they were Egyptian gods. You didn't see any of the Egyptian god pantheons there. That is from Moon Knight, and a lot of those gods were still battling, and 2 gods lost their lives
Mhm.
fighting Gore the God Butcher, which will be talked about, like later on in other scenes and stuff like that. But we went over that inside Moon Knight, and Zeus makes his grand entrance. I was floored. I was absolutely floored, because you think that they can go very serious with this character. He's Almighty Zeus. He's the leader of the gods, well, in that area. And he's a comedic genius. All he's worrying about is the orgy. Everybody, we're gonna get to the orgy. We're gonna be giving out raffles to the orgy, and those people that are in are invited. And he's talking about that, and Thor's trying to tell Jane, "Yo, listen, I'm gonna talk to him. I'm gonna pull him to the side. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna tell him what's going on because Thor understands how you're supposed to approach the gods." It didn't happen that way, and they found out that who was talking, and he said, "I want to hear who's talking. I want to know what you're talking about. Step up to the podium." So Thor goes to the podium, and he rips Thor's clothes off. Thor is butt naked in front of Zeus, and this is a moment of embarrassment for Thor, but a moment that he's like, "Come on, man, you really taking this a little bit too far right now,"
Mm-hmm.
and it's pure comedy again. And he challenges Zeus, and a fight breaks out, and he starts because they have Spartans there, which I found absolutely dope for that whole scenario. That Jane and the team and everybody gets there to help Thor fight, and they're fighting the Spartans there, and Zeus actually throws the his lightning bolt, which I found was hilarious again.
Mm-hmm.
And he catches it because Thor is the god of thunder, and Zeus is the lord of lightning. And he catches it, and he throws it right back to Zeus, and it goes through his chest, and Zeus falls off his little pedestal. And they take, Valkyrie goes up there, and she takes the lightning bolt because they need that weapon to actually go after Gore because they're not going to get a team because
Mm-hmm.
Zeus denied that request. That's why the fight broke out. But as they're leaving, and Thor, a big thing that we skipped over, Thor has his enchanted goats, which are very serious in the books. But Taika made them a running joke in this film, which was hilarious. They're very strong. They're very capable in battle. They're like Odin's crows.
Mm-hmm.
But Thor has these goats, and we saw how he got these goats, and the old king gave it to him as a gift, but he really wanted the goats out of there.
Screaming goats.
And the goats are screaming, and as they're leaving, they use again I keep on saying Thunderstrike in my head, Stonebreaker as a conduit to use to get the Bifrost going and to leave.
Yep.
But I seen so many different gods and so many extra stuff while they were leaving and while they were going to strategize while they was getting to Gore, that it was just blowing my mind. And by the third time I saw the film, I really got a chance to see the two celestials there, and there was a third celestial there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this scene itself, when Russell Crowe is Zeus and he's standing there, it's it was I was in amazement because I never thought that we would get to this space in a Thor film, and we are
Mm-hmm.
actually at this space where Russell Crowe is playing Zeus, and he's playing it in a way with his Greek accent, which is hilarious to me.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thoughts after they fought Gore and they get to this space?
Let's see. So with the great high palace of the gods or the god kingdom, I like the illustrious grand nature, the opulence that was strewn about with all the gods and goddesses in their high chairs and Zeus putting on a spectacle. I didn't recognize Russell Crowe at first, and I was like, who is this guy? And then I finally realized it was Russell Crowe. So it was quite amusing the way that he was portraying Zeus and his flamboyant, bombastic nature about talking about orgies and how the gods are gonna be okay, like get your raffle tickets ready. Um, and then the casual nature that he exuded dominance with the use of the lightning bolt and putting on a show and airs. And definitely someone who's used to the respect owed to the king of the gods. And Thor has said like this is the guy, this is my hero growing up, and then to come to face the realities of the faults and shortcomings of Zeus, was
Yeah.
really impressive, and the resolute nature Thor had. Like, okay, like if you're not gonna help me, then what good are you? This is serious matter that we have business to take care of. Um, so I liked the fight that broke out. I like Tessa Thompson and just the swagger she brings to Valkyrie as she
Yeah.
saunters out there to retrieve the lightning bolt, gives a little flirt to the ladies before kicking off. Yeah, and then they were, as you said, heading on back onto the rainbow to take care of things. And a little bit before this, I think, getting some more of that narration of the rom-com aspects with the domestic life with Thor and Jane beforehand. This is one of the criticisms that I had because this was a small change that for the Mighty Thor and how they were alluding to one night or was just talking to Mjolnir like butt to butt, like, oh, dude, like I think she's the one, et cetera, et cetera. And
Yeah.
saying, Mjolnir, make sure that you'll always be there to protect her. And then Thor touches Mjolnir, and then Mjolnir has a glow enchantment, like when Odin enchanted
Hmm.
Mjolnir. And so that alluding to Jane in the MCU being able to wield Mjolnir because of the enchantment, I didn't like on the flip side of where we get like Endgame of Steve Rogers is able to wield Mjolnir just because he's worthy. So I didn't like that aspect because that wasn't present in the Mighty Thor comic run of an enchantment that allowed Jane to wield it. Um, but at the end, Taika does try to bring it back to the spirit that the comic run and the movie share on why Jane is Thor and worthy. It's because of her tenacity and willingness to put everything on the line at the end of the day. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit into the movie, uh, to they're going to the Dark Realm to fighting Gore. I like the use of the absence of color and
Beautiful.
how, yeah, with each weapon strikes and the Uru and the lightning, you get flashes of color on like Thor, Jane, and then the lightning from Tessa, Valkyrie when she's wielding it. Um, and I really like that aspect, but ultimately it comes to a culmination at the gates of infinity is where this movie wraps up with a both a fantastic, incredible battle with gore, also a wild sequence that can only be born from Taika with the
Yep.
use of when you free the children of Asgard, that Thor himself deems these little Asgardians as worthy temporarily of
Hmm.
the power of Thor and imbues them all with the super strength and lightning and godlike powers of Thor, and they just go to town in a wild yet beautiful cinematography of fighting. What were you thinking when you were seeing little Princess Tutu just running headfirst into the mob of monsters and all that?
It was pure genius. It it was pandering to your audience and not forgetting that children matter. He gave the strength to the children.
Mm-hmm.
So for every child that was there watching the film, they got a chance to see that moment because the overarching thought and there's a little thread that he put in there. You too can be Thor.
Mm-hmm.
And when Jane Foster is Thor, people have those questions, how, and he explained, just like when Odin whispered into the hammer and told him, he who be worthy shall be,
Mm-hmm.
hold this Thor hammer. And he whispered to the hammer as well, and she became worthy to wield it for an extended period of time. So at this point, it's a little bit different from the Captain America part, but he used his power to splinter it to the children, to empower the
Mm-hmm.
children so they can make it home. And they went to town on the minions, and my son is sitting there watching. He's like, Daddy, I want to see what the girl is gonna do with the rabbit. And when she, shooting beams out of her eyes, the rabbit's shooting beams out of the eyes, my son went nuts, absolutely nuts. And he's 11 years old, so he's like, wow, he's charged up at this point. Now the difference from the comic book and the difference in the movie is Gore is trying to, in the comic books, get to a god bomb, and a bomb that would detonate to kill all the gods in the universe. and that's a little bit far fetched for the movie. So what they did was they introduced an entity inside Marvel Comics that has been there longer than anyone. Jack Kirby and Stan Lee has introduced, and Jim Starlin has introduced Eternity in itself, and they actually show them. I never thought that we would get to this point. I never thought that I would see Eternity from the books on the screen. I never thought that they can get the concept to bring it across, but they actually do. And how they did it was pure genius. They again, it was a blue sky, reflective water type floor with Eternity sitting there in his infinite self. But the hall that they was in, that where he
Mm-hmm.
did save the children from,
Mm-hmm.
you saw Ego, you saw Yatu, you saw one of the Celestials, you saw Infinity, and it was one more that was there. You see these entities that they will bring into the Marvel universe at a later date, but the battle with Gore and his
Mm-hmm.
relentlessness to get to Infinity to finish his mission, um it was good because you can sympathize with him as a character, as a so-called quote villain, because a lot of these villains in Marvel universe aren't really villains. They're just people with a
Mm-hmm.
different perspective on what things should be. And Thor and Jane, Jane gave it her all at that period of time, and she's
Mm-hmm.
just, the hammer is shattered, and she's back to Jane. And Thor's like, the battle's over. Listen, man, do whatever you're gonna do. Choose love. You could choose to bring back your kid instead of killing the gods. Why would you use your one wish on hate instead of love?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Yo, man, why you?" Christian Bale's like, "Why you turning your back on me?" He's like, "Cause I only have precious seconds with her, and I would
Mm-hmm.
rather spend my time with the person that I love, that I'm never gonna get a moment again with, than sit here and fight with you. The fight is
Mm-hmm.
over. I'm done." And he chooses this love aspect, and he stays there, and he talks to Jane, and he's stroking her hair as she's passing away, and Gore himself is making his wish in front of Eternity, and he wishes for his child to be back, and he's like, "Please, take care of my love, take care of my child." And
Mm-hmm.
Thor becomes an instant daddy, and Thor has family, and he has someone he has to love, and someone he has to look after and care for. And those are the things that he was missing in the beginning of the film. That's when he sat there and he meditated as a warrior to become something else. And Grog said, "Hey man, he would make Thor would make a good father.
Mm-hmm.
Thor will make a great father." And that actually comes to fruition at the end of the film, because he's entrusted with looking after Gore's daughter, and she has powers, which is really crazy. And she's able to, will Milner on Stormbreaker as well. I thought it was a great way to tie a bow to it, and he's teaching her how to defend the weak, and be there as a beacon instead of being a menace,
Right.
and not depend on gods, and to, if you're going to be a god, be a helpful god instead of just letting things happen to people that actually worship you. I thought the visualizations of the film, like the stylistic choices that he uses, he's so steeped in the late 80s 90s music, visual art style, how it felt like Transformers the movie era. It felt like these type of things, like GI Joe the movie. I felt like a real child watching it, and
Mm-hmm.
it gave me feelings of euphoria, because he understands how not to way down lines with so much heaviness of cancer and death and despair, and but bring in some levity to the situation. And some of it is a little bit overt, and some of it, deadpans in some spaces. But at the end of the day, I think he nails 90% of the jokes that he goes for. And you might miss 10. And I think humor is subjective. But
Hmm.
I also feel that not every film needs to be a serious blood drawn blood battle.
Right.
And we could have serious subjects but told in a different form, and I think this actually fits the bill. I thought it was fantastic from beginning to end. I thought the music was great. I thought all the actors and actresses that were a part of it, from the kids to the adults, showed out. And I really loved the film. I rate it very high in my pantheon of Marvel films. I thought it was great.
Yep. As we wrap up, there were two post-credit scenes for this movie, and my one of my other criticisms with Jane slash Samantha Thor is I felt like we didn't get enough of her. I
Right.
definitely, going into the movie, thought that she was going to make it out of this film and she would play more of a prevalent role in Phase 4. That did not happen. Um, and I felt the way that they handled the cancer racking her body in the film was in a more expedited manner to
Yeah.
have this be a one shot for in the movie, which I guess, kind of a good problem to have that your audience wants more of what you're bringing. But I wish she was stuck around longer, and I don't think she's coming back, even though in the comics she does die, but then comes back as Valkyrie.
Yeah.
And we see in one of the post credit scenes, we see Jane appear at the gates of Valhalla, greeted by Heimdall and welcoming her to this paradise, and that you died a warrior's death and you are
Yep.
going to be rewarded for that. Um, and the second one, we see that
My
Zeus
favorite.
actually survived, and he's going on a monologue of how, like, we got to show these kids respect. Back in my day, no one would even dare. And he challenges his son Hercules to, go and remind people like who we are, and we get to see Hercules for the first time in the MCU, just big, muscular, menacing. So I'm gonna pass to you, King. What you thought of these two scenes? Do you think that this is gonna be a final note for Jane Foster as Thor? And how are you feeling about Hercules coming into the MCU?
I don't think this is the last time we see Jane Foster. I think Valkyrie has to take a step down because she lost a kidney. I think Odin, we will probably see Odin again, as he is the one who gives the okay for her to come back to life after she passes away in the books to be Valkyrie. So she's going to be queen of the Valkyries. I think you bring back the Valkyries once you get Asgard back to Asgard, when that actually happens, when they take it off of Midgard.
Hmm.
But the Hercules thing is very good for me because I have the first appearance of Hercules inside the Thor book when him and Thor were fighting over Jane Foster over a cup of coffee. And I don't know how they're going to tell the story. I don't really care how they get to this space, but I cannot wait to see those two clash. And we have the Prince of Power inside the MCU. So we saw the first glimpses of it, and I'm pretty sure Hercules will be in the next Thor film. And
Yes,
I
I agree.
hope to God it's a Jack Kirby inspired film from beginning to end, because Hercules is a ladies' man, and he is the only one that can match Thor power for power. He is the
Hmm.
Prince of Power for a reason. I've all of his books. I'm a huge fan of the character, and I cannot wait for them to explore this character. And I can't wait to this character to get his own movies. I'm pretty sure he will. I'm pretty sure that he will take Thor's place in the Avengers like he did before. I cannot wait for this to happen. It was great. He had the old suit on too. It looked dope.
Hmm. Yep, that was definitely a pleasant surprise. Well, I think that pretty much is going to wrap it up for our Thor Lord's Minute on Thor Love and Thunder. Hopefully, you all enjoyed it. Let us know in the realm what you thought of this movie as well. And thank you so much for joining us. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at lordsofgaming.net. I'm Ty Swinson, here with Lord King, and this has been the Lord's Minute.
Peace.